This is Mr. Sawaka Pacific. Let us look at Old Testament, Pentateuch, and the historical books. So in this question, we are going to look at the books that makes up the Old Testament. And these are the 5 books that are believed to have been written by Moses, and it is called the Old Testament. So in this question, we shall look at the creation account. We shall look at the book of Genesis as we look at the creation account. Different personalities like Abraham. We shall look at him, the book of Exodus, and we go deep and we look at the Passover, Moses, and so on and so forth. We shall look at books like that of Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Numbers. So today we are going to look at the core of the book, of the Old Testament. So we want to see that where did the Old Testament and where did it start from, and who started the Old Testament? Because we are having 2 testaments. We have the New and the Old. So we want to see how was it composed and who is the composer of this Old Testament. So to begin with, the Christian Bible contains the total number of books. These are 66 books organized by all churches as the Holy Scripture. So the Old Testament has 39. Out of the 66 books, the Old Testament has got 39 books, and the New Testament has got 27. So after the Old Testament, the apostles agreed, and now they started to select what they call the Torah. So the Torah, they selected 27 books that makes the New Testament. But the Old Testament was having 39 books. But during the selection, some books were left out, and they were able to get only 27 books. And there are criteria that they followed in the process of the selection of the books. So there are some things they looked at to take a book, and there are some things they looked at to leave some particular books behind. So in some Bibles, like those used by the Catholic, the Bibles that are used by the Catholic Church, the list is longer than that accepted by the Protestants. So the writing and the correcting together of these books was spread over all the century. So the Old Testament was first written by in Hebrew. So the Pentateuch or the Torah these are the 5 books in the Hebrew Bible. So they in the Hebrew society, and the New Testament was first written in Greek. So the apostles agreed the language that they should use in the writing of the Old Testament and New Testament. So they agreed which language should we employ, because they saw that at least the population was understanding the Greek language. So what they did, they sat and they agreed on which kind of language should they use in the writing of the gospel, such that they make it easy for the entire generation to actually understand. So the books of the Old Testament begin with Genesis. Genesis, that is the creation of the universe. That is the beginning. Genesis means the beginning. So the beginning of the earth, and the end, they end with what they call the Malachi. The Malachi is the last book in the Old Testament. So all Bibles have the 39 books of the Old Testament. So these are, we have the book of Genesis, which talks about the beginning of the universe, beginning of the creation. Exodus, it is talking about the restoration of the Israelites. It's talking about the commandments that God gave to the Israelites, the 10 commandments. It is talking about Moses. It is talking about the restoration of the Israel as elect of God. So Leviticus is talking about sacrifices. That is the burnt, the fellowship, the sinful sacrifice, so on and so forth. We have the book of Numbers, the book of Deuteronomy, we have the book of Joshua, we have the book of Judges. Those are the kings. We have the kings, the priests, and the judges. We have Ruth. We have Ruth 1 and 2. Then we have First Samuel and Second Samuel. We have First and Second Kings. We have First and Second Chronicles. We have Ezra. We have there are many books: Job, Psalms, the Proverbs, the Ecclesiastes, and Songs of Songs. We have Isaiah. Those are prophets. We have Jeremiah, prophet. We have Lamentation. We have Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonan, and many books that makes that makes the Old Testament. Before these books were written, oral traditions were used. That is the use of the mouth. So in the Old Testament, people used to use what they call oral methods to pass message from one generation to another, to pass message from one area to another. The oral method was employed before the gospel was written. So this one at least helped the preachers, the apostles, to expand the church widely using the mouth. But time came, because of the persecutions that they went through, they reached a time and they were afraid of being persecuted. And what they did, they met and they agreed which language to use, which books to take, and they sat down and they gathered the information which they used to write during the ministry of Jesus. And from there, they composed what they call the Old Testament. Then after some time, it is from the Old Testament that they got a New Testament. So some of the Old Testament materials, for example, the stories of patriarchs like Abraham and his descendants had a long oral tradition before it was committed to writing. Other materials such as the words of many prophets. Look at prophets like Nathan, prophet Elijah, prophet Elisha, prophet Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Hosea, among others. So all these writings, all these were through oral measures. But time came and their message, which they used to preach, was later converted into writings. So the writing of the Old Testament, the writings of the Old Testament were written by hand. They used their hand to write and the help of the ink. And from here, they wrote them on scrolls. Scrolls is like when you get a piece of paper and the piece of is like a stick. You write, you get a paper and you roll it on the paper. So they used to make scrolls, and these scrolls were later kept somewhere, and the new generations used to get to know about the religion through revising what was written by their ancestors on the scrolls. And these scrolls were kept. For example, look at the covenant books, which comprised of the covenant laws, the 10 commandments that they gave to the Israelites as they had left the land of Egypt, where King Pharaoh used to take them through slavery. So God gave them the 10 commandments through Moses. And he told him, let these people follow these commandments. So these commandments were written and they were put on scrolls and they were kept in the ark. And this is the covenant books. But later on, it was stolen and taken by the Philistines and other nations. But in Jerusalem, David, the son of Jesse, returned the covenant books back to Jerusalem. And from there, he had a plan of setting the temple, so on and so forth. And his son, the one who built that, is Solomon. We shall look at that story. So the Hebrew scrolls in existence are those discovered in caves near the Dead Sea from 1947 onwards. So they used to make research, they used to explore, and they visit those important places where they believe these people left information. So they used to gather that information, and later on it was compiled and sealed, and they made the Old Testament. So the Old Testament is subdivided into different sections. Still, it is divided into different sections. So if we are to section the Old Testament, we have different books still within the Old Testament that are given division. Look at what they call the law books. So if we are to talk about law books, people doing divinity paper 1, these books are found in section A. Section 8 is where we put law books. Law books comprises of books like the Genesis, the Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and Numbers. So these are the books that are talking about laws and order that were given to the Israelites by different people through actually God gave them orders and laws to follow through his go-betweens. That is, for example, Moses, Abraham, and many more. And still, these law books were to be kept, and the people had to follow the laws that within those books. Division 2 are historical books. Historical books are the books that are talking about the past, that are bringing together what happened. So these records were recordings that were kept by the Israel. They comprise of the Israel's histories from the time after Moses' death, when the Israelites crossed the river Jordan into Canaan until their liberation from exile, that is in the land of Babylon, under the Babylonian leadership by different kings. We shall look at people like King Nebuchadnezzar, who was the Babylonian king by the time the Israelites were taken into exile. So these books comprises of 1st and 2nd Samuel. We shall look at Samuel, who was the son of Hannah, a co-wife to Peninnah. We shall look at kings like King David, King Solomon, King Ahabu, King Hezekiah, and many more. We shall look at 1st and 2nd Chronicles, the book of Joshua, Judges, and so on and so forth. Still, we have prophetic books. Prophetic books, people doing Div 1, we find them in what we call section C, where we have prophetic books and the wisdom literature. Wisdom literature, that is Job and Psalms. So here we have prophetic books. These are books that are containing messages from prophets. Prophets, these are messengers of God. So prophets used to carry a message from God to the people, and these people, at least, they helped in promoting morals and bringing back the rusty hope in the hearts of the people of Israel. So prophets, this is the third section in the Old Testament. So prophets also played a bigger role. We shall look at them. Prophets like Prophet Ezekiel. Ezekiel played a bigger part in the history of Israel. We have Prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah, who was called when he was young. Ezekiel, God called him and told him to go to the people in Babylon and give him the message. We shall look at the valley of dry bones and Prophet Ezekiel. We shall look at Isaiah, who moved naked for some good times, and he announced the coming of the drought. We have the Lamentations. We have Amos, whom God gave 5 visions: the art of rockers, rain of fire, plumbering line, basket of fruits, and the rockers, and so on and so forth. We have Hosea, a prophet who married a prostitute, that is Gomer. Gomer was a prostitute, and they gave birth to 3 children: Jezebel, Not My People, and Unloved. So we shall look at those people. Still, there are many books under Division 3. Then Division 4, that is wisdom literature, or the writings. Wisdom literature comprises of Proverbs, the book of Psalms, the book of Job, and the Ecclesiastes. So Job, we shall look at Job as a suffering servant of God who suffered a great deal of problems. He lost everything. The children, he had 10 children. They died as they had gone for the feast at their elders' brother's home. He lost the camels, the servants, the plantations, and his friends, Bildad, Phinehas, and Zophar, and the wife. They ignored him during the time of suffering. We shall look at Job himself. Psalms, we shall look at Psalms like Psalms 2, Psalms 20, prayer of victory, Psalms 22, that is the anguish, Psalms 137, the lamentation Psalm, which was talking about the exiles were in the land of Babylon. So these are the divisions in in Old Testament.